go. I'll repeat that for those that couldn't hear me. Today is Tuesday, February 18th, 2020. This is a Moscow City Council meeting, folks. Sandra?
I'd like to invite anyone who would like to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Sandra. Okay, first item on the agenda is the consent agenda.
I move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Art and a second by Gina to approve the consent agenda as it is stated. I will start to roll with Sandra.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye. Aye.
Okay. Item number 2, staff recognition report. Gary, do we have anything tonight, sir?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Okay, with that, we'll go on to mayor's appointments. And I have 2 appointments for council to consider. Cynthia King, Historic Preservation Commission, expiration expire 12/31/2022. And Courtney LaFrance, Human Rights Commission, expiration 12/31/2022. Entertain a motion from council.
I would move acceptance of the slate of appointments.
Second.
Sandra did it.
I got Art as a first, Sandra as a second to approve these 2 appointments, and I will start to roll with Maureen.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Do we have Cynthia or Courtney with us this evening? Please stand up if you please stand up. And would you like to say anything to us? You're welcome to come up to the podium and speak if you'd like. You don't have to, but you.
I just wanted to say I'm Cynthia, the one on the Historic
Okay.
Commission, and thank you for considering and accepting my appointment. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you, Cynthia. I, as the mayor, really appreciate the people in our community that work on the various commissions because we have a slew of volunteers that do that, and it's very, very important. And myself, being on several different commissions myself prior, it takes a lot of time, and we appreciate folks doing that, so thank you very much. Okay, with that, we will move on to item number 4, which is public comment, mayor's response period. We let folks come up and tell us what's on their mind, as long as it is something that's not in front of a planning and zoning and or board of adjustments. Action items on this evening's agenda, which are items number 6 and 7. People can comment after we do the presentation on those 2 things. But anything other than that, please come up, give us your name. We'll give you 3 minutes and let us know what's on your mind.
My name is Keith Ishida. I'm the general manager of PACT EMS. I'm also a paramedic. 2305 South Main Street, Moscow, Idaho. I want to thank you first for the members of the City Council for this privilege to come before you and voice some of my concerns and offer you maybe a solution. First, I find it necessary that maybe you know a little bit about me because I've taken some time to look at your guys' bios, and I'm quite impressed. My wife, Chris, and I just recently moved here from Ontario, Oregon, which is about 45 miles southwest of Boise, Idaho. While in Ontario, I worked for the Department of Corrections. I also own my own upholstery shop. I am also an inventor of an EMS device that goes on a ambulance cot that makes the transport of large people possible on a narrow 20-inch wide cot. And I also taught the EMT classes at the college at Treasure Valley Community College. Through my busy life, I managed to get my paramedic degree and pursue my passion of EMS. And I've worked 35 years in the EMS industry, working for both volunteer and paid full-time services. While teaching at the college, you always get to this chapter called the history of EMS. And if none of you are familiar with the history of EMS, I'd encourage you to do some browsing and find out about how the EMS kind of evolved. You know, it started out with the Civil War. It went through changes in Korea with the helicopters, and it also, Vietnam had a big impact on the evolution of EMS. And that's what you have today is what we know as emergency medical services. And the reason I'm telling you this is because history always has a way of repeating itself. History tells us if the system is working. It tells us if the system is failing. And history, and quote, when accountability isn't established, nothing gets done and nobody is held responsible. There's a thing called the National Fire Protection Association standards for medical response for volunteer units to be 9 minutes. My understanding is that because the system here is volunteer, there's a understanding that they don't have to follow that standard. As an outsider, and from my experience, I can, without a doubt, tell you that the current 911 system is failing, and it does not work. There needs to be change, and accountability needs to be established. I think the citizens, the students, and the guests that come to Moscow, Idaho should not be excluded from what history has already set in motion. You know, the Zachariasons, Troy and Kelly, their families, their employees, known through the community for their generosity and willingness to serve and volunteer. And right now, that's what the Zachariasons are serving their community. And right now, they are volunteering. The people, your citizens, and are
Please
looking
wrap it
to
up.
you.
Yeah, I'll give you 4 minutes. Please wrap it up if you would, please.
Yes, just 4 more lines. Through them, for a current system to be accountable and a mutual aid agreement in Moscow that just makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith.
Wow, I didn't know he was going to say all that. I haven't seen him all day. Kelly Zachariason. I'm the agency administrator at PAC DMS, 521 North Main. 2 weeks ago, I asked a few questions. I'm not sure exactly what protocols are for response for answers, but I had a few more questions actually that might tie into what Keith has said. I'm curious how the City Council and the city measures the performance of the EMS provider. Are there a metric? Is there a standard for response? Or I know Mr. Riedner mentioned some delays. What are those delays? How are they corrected? Are they assessed? I'm curious if there's a third-party annual audit of that assessment, or if it's just solely reported by representatives of the volunteer fire department or the city representatives of the fire department. And also the NFPA standards that Keith mentioned, for volunteer agencies, it's 90% of the time ambulance rolling to the scene in under 60 seconds. And I know our system probably doesn't do that. And it's not the fault of the volunteers, it's just the way our system is structured. I know they're working hard and rushing to the scene and rushing to get the ambulance. And we're just looking for ways that maybe we can tighten that ship, because I certainly wouldn't want an ambulance to be delayed 15 minutes. I know that we have quick response units that get there, but one paramedic is one person, and it's really challenging for them to get on scene and administer the proper care without that ambulance and their crew. And then you mentioned commissions. I was wondering if there is an EMS commission with all the other commissions that maybe actually looks at public safety, or a public safety commission in general. So that's all the questions I have.
Thank you. Other folks want to come up and talk to us? Okay, with that, we will move on to item number 5, which is a Citizens Commission report, Moscow's Art Commission. We have Megan Cherry and Lauren McCleary here with us this evening. So Megan, you have the floor. Or Miss Megan, I should say.
Good evening, Mayor Lambert, members of City Council, and city staff. Tonight, it's my honor to introduce our Moscow Arts Commission Chair. Lauren McCleary is here tonight to give a report for the Moscow Arts Commission's activities in 2019. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about Lauren before she gets up here to talk. Lauren's an artist, and I think that's really important because that's something that she brings into all of the work that she does. And she does a lot of different kinds of work. So along with being an artist, Lauren is a professor of arts education at the University of Idaho. She earned her MFA from WSU in 2009, and this is her third year as the MAC chair, and she does a great job, and it's really an honor to work with Lauren, so I'll turn it over to her.
Hi, Lauren.
Hello, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Thank you for being here, and city staff. Let's see if my scarf is going to press buttons. Okay. Yes, thanks for this opportunity to talk to you about what we've been up to over the last year in the Arts Commission. And thank you to Megan for guiding that ship and creating a nice PowerPoint for me to work from. Our commission is made up of various community members representing different avenues of creative arts, visual arts, performing arts, business, and we're lucky to have Linnea Sheneman as our devoted high school student member. And we're currently looking to fill 2 seats. One is our college student seat that is for 1 year, and then a regular appointment. And thank you also to Christine Gilmore in the vice chairs here tonight. So this one thing we started doing this year, or last year in 2019, is tallying our volunteer hours. We knew we did a lot, but now we have some numbers to go with it. So the MAC members tallied up to 288 hours and 75 minutes. Community members for 22 hours, so a total of 310 hours and 75 minutes of volunteer work over the year. And some of the ways that we do that volunteer work outside of attending meetings are 3rd Street Gallery, reception outreach, event tabling, arts and culture MAC activities. I'll tell you more about those, and program visioning sessions. The strategic planning process was a big goal to get through. Started in 2018 and wrapped up through 2019. We went through that process to assess the needs and opportunities for the arts program, and the plan was recently presented to Public Works Finance Committee and will be uploaded into the city's new strategic planning software. Megan did a great job making this a collaborative effort with each subcommittee, bringing forward hefty chunks, and making sure that everyone had a chance to give their input. And it came together really nicely, and that will provide us a map, especially for these major areas for growth as identified through the process, which would be communication and collaboration, arts and culture education, events and programs, public art, and 3rd Street Gallery. We also reorganized our subcommittees and steering committees a bit to just make sure people weren't doing extra work in 2 committees, and make sure that the right committee was focused on specific programs such as 3rd Street Gallery, focusing on the plein air event. So that reorganization has been very helpful in just keeping things moving forward. Arts marketing and outreach is a new improvement. We're trying to make a cohesive look for our programming. Over the years, we did a lot of organic growing, and it happened fast. And now looking back, there's not a connection in the branding necessarily. So there's an art style guide in the works that will. And so all MAC programs going forward will feature a new promotional appearance. The Arts and Culture Education Committee, subcommittee, this year really started to think about ways that we can develop what we call MACtivities, which are a focus on family art making during other programming, such as the Winter Carnival. So the pictures you see there are families making wreaths or crowns, depending on how they saw them, right before the parade at the Winter Carnival. And there was a lot of good energy there, and we hope to do more of that with other programs that are already established. The first annual poetry relay happened. Susan Hodgen, our Moscow Poet Laureate, created that really fun event, bringing together local poets and in the council chambers. So it's fun to have poetry read here in this room. And it's happening again soon, April 1st. It will be the next one. I imagine there'll be some humor involved. And a refreshed vision for entertainment in the park, which is a family entertainment series in June. And just making sure that the experience is always valuable and good for everyone. Events and programs subcommittee, they worked on increasing our presence at tabling, such as at Moscow Farmers Market and other events. Plus Plein Air is growing as an event that regional artists are knowing about and coming to. So you can see previous record for participants was 27 artist registrations, and this year last year in 2019 there were 36. So that continues to grow and develop and be an exciting event to look forward to in the region, not just Moscow. So also Moscow Art Walk celebrated its 15th year in Moscow. The Public Art Committee had a big project in 2019, going through the selection process for the Sea and Main couplet piece, which you can see to the right there, an illustration of it. It will be installed this year. There'll be a renewed vision for the temporary collections, including the sculpture garden, the ITC sculpture garden, and vinyl wrap traffic boxes around town. And the 3rd Street Gallery, we saw an increase in MAC participation in the scheduling of what happens here at the 3rd Street Gallery, and also improvements as far as promotions and outreach, so getting people aware of what happens here, and elevated reception standards, so people are starting to expect a really nice event with good food, so we have to keep delivering. But you can see that average attendance for 2019 was 72 people, and that's a packed room. That was the poetry relay? No, that was, Wooden Words. This is when the poets were also involved. They collaborated with wood sculptors and did a reading that night in this room as well. So a lot of people came to that, and we're very impressed by that. Okay, so what to watch for in 2020, and the updated promotional style, submittable registration systems, which is going to make life easier for artists to submit their work to our calls for art, and also for our selection committees to review them. And then an increased focus on arts education, public art installation at Sea and Main, And we do have the Mayor's Arts Award this year. So those are what to keep your eye out. Thank you for your time.
Well, Megan, Lauren, that Moscow Arts Award with the mayor, I love that in the
Yeah.
fall of the year. That's always a good time, and I'm always looking forward to our art walk in June as well, so.
Yeah.
Thank you for your work. Counselors have questions? Art, did you have something you want to?
Nope.
Anybody have any questions for Lauren? Thank you very much for your hard work. We look forward to all the things coming forward, especially the seeing.
See you in Maine.
Yep, seeing Maine will be great. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item number 6, Sixth Street Bridge Replacement Project. Bill Belknap is with us this evening. Hello, Bill.
Good evening. Thank you, Your Honor, members of the council. So we're here this evening to talk about the Sixth Street Bridge Replacement Project. As you may recall, in April of 2019, we had a fairly significant flooding event that occurred within Moscow at that time. This is a picture of the Sixth Street Bridge reaching capacity before that flooding event overtopped the roadway later that evening. We had a fair substantial debris and water damage to the roadway at that point in time, and this was kind of the condition of the roadway as it was found the following morning. That is not necessarily a bridge. It is a culvert system that includes 3 culverts of various sizes. We assume that was constructed back when this was a county road prior to annexation and incorporation inside the city. The roadway was undermined, we had pavement failure, and the guardrail itself was undermined and does not have any remaining structural strength to that system, and as a result we had to put up the concrete barricades as an interim measure to help prevent a vehicle from departing the roadway and ending up in the creek channel. On that flooding event that did result in a federal major disaster declaration for the state of Idaho and Latah County, to assist with those recovery efforts, and in that effort, FEMA did provide the city with some reimbursement for both labor and construction and repair activities and damages to properties. FEMA does provide reimbursement for infrastructure damage on local streets and roadways, but they do not provide assistance for those that are designated as major collectors or federal aid routes. Unfortunately, Sixth Street is designated as a major collector on the state's of Idaho's functional classification map, so we were not eligible to receive any reimbursement or assistance with replacements to that structure at that time. The state of Idaho does operate the CDBG, the Community Development Block Grant Program, and one of the categories of awards that they offer is post-disaster recovery. The maximum award underneath that program is $150,000 per event, and any eligible entity, which would be a city, a county, or any public agency, must make application for those funds within 1 year of the event, which is why we're here before you this evening. Also in the surrounding area, the city is currently working on the next phase of Mountain View Road improvements. That'll extend from Joseph Street here, kind of at the south end of the project, up to the intersection of Mountain View and 6th Street, with the proposed installation of a roundabout. Unfortunately, the project funding was somewhat limited, and that project kind of tapers back into the existing roadway. The sidewalks in here are just to the east of Paradise Creek, north is here to the right, so this is Mountain View and this is 6th Street. But the result of that project, and again, we're right now in final design and right-of-way acquisition of the project, and that construction year is dependent upon funding. At this point in time, we have it programmed within our capital improvement program as being a 2024 construction project. Unfortunately, that project does end just to the east of the creek channel. To the west, we have a full roadway section on 6th Street with sidewalks on both sides and adequate widths for on-street parking, vehicle lanes, and bicycle lanes. But this culvert structure will remain, if we do not end up replacing it or taking some other action, it will remain as a gap in the roadway system and as a pedestrian impediment on the 6th Street corridor. As I mentioned, that is an existing culvert system. It is substandard in today's guidelines and is inadequate to address flood conveyance during those events. It does contribute to the backup and flooding that we see in the Roosevelt corridor just upstream, and it is one of our most significant collection points for flood debris hitting that bridge because of the 3 separate culverts. Once that Mountain View project is completed, this will remain a fairly significant gap in the roadway system without bicycle pedestrian facilities. We have reviewed various options that included extending those culverts and constructing concrete head walls, but we have concluded that that does not address the underlying hydraulic constraints or the flood collection issues that exist there, and would ultimately end up costing likely half of the construction of a free span bridge structure in that location, and have come to the conclusion that the construction of a bridge at that location would be the preferred long-term alternative. The total project cost is just about $1.15 million. So the construction estimate here at $1,006,000 for the construction of the bridge is based on our most recent bid results on the 3rd Street Bridge. Now, that bridge was a somewhat unique design because of the right-of-way constraints and the vertical constraints we had in that roadway, so it was a slightly more expensive design as well as expensive construction methods because of the tight constraints. And we also, that project was bid in the summer months, which was not optimum bidding period for that project. In this location, because of the wider right-of-way and greater vertical freedom we have in the roadway surface, we do feel that there are potentially lower cost options, but we want to take a look at least plan for what we think is the worst case scenario for the construction cost. We are estimating $150,000 for design on the project as well. The proposed project funding, the city did receive some reimbursements, as I mentioned, from FEMA. Some is for work yet to be completed, but we also received reimbursement for activities that happened during the flooding event. Those reimbursements for activities not yet to be completed, we are assuming or we're estimating to be a little over $80,000 that could be reallocated towards this project. In the preparation of the current budget for the FY 2020 fiscal year, $100,000 was also moved from LID construction into Streets Capital with the understanding that we knew we were going to have a project involved at the 6th Street Bridge. We just didn't know what the project was at that point in time. There was some additional funding in the LID construction account that could be reallocated to this effort, so that is in the current budget. And if we can add in then the $150,000 award from the Idaho Department of Commerce, should we be successful in that grant application, that would bring the total funding up and leave a remaining balance of $827,308 that would have to come from the current street capital accumulations. All of our current planned or programmed projects would continue to be funded. So obviously A Street, which was a significant project, has already been funded and will be under construction this summer. The reconstruction of Almond Street is also planned for this year to address the deteriorating pavement condition in that location. Lily Street is programmed for 2021. Reconstruction between 3rd and A Street. The Mountain View project, as I mentioned, in 2024. And then all of our local highway safety improvement projects located on 3rd, 6th, and Polk Streets would continue. Those are in 2021, 2022, and 2023. And we've also accounted for the recent local highway safety improvement project we just applied for this year for the safety improvements at A and Baker. The proposed TAP application that the council also made in the fall of last year for the underpass at South Main. So all of those projects that really were identified or we have made grant applications or we have been awarded grant applications for the projects, we can continue to fund those. The one area that we might see a reduction for a temporary period of time would be in our surface treatment program that we would expect would be lowered for a period of 2 years to absorb this additional cost out of Streets Capital, and then we could begin to escalate that surface treatment amount. We are programming with this project for the next, not including this year, but in the following 2 fiscal years, we would have $300,000 available in that surface treatment program. And that funds the slurry seals and the rubberized chip seal projects to help us maintain and extend the life of our roadway system. That we'd be funding that at $300,000 per year for the next 2 fiscal years compared to the historical 9-year average of about $290,000. We have seen fairly large expenditures in that category in the last 2 years as the city made a stronger effort and received some additional gas tax revenues to improve that program. Over the last 2 years, it has averaged $615,000, but as you look historically, That program has averaged really between 73,000 or so and 264,000, so a little bit under that 300,000 mark. But we had the significant expenditures in 2018 and 19 where we received those additional gas tax revenues and were able to do more surface treatment. So we would see surface treatment levels that would be more consistent with our historical averages. And then we would begin to build those back up to reach the levels that we hope to reach for that program overall. This evening, staff is seeking approval to prepare and submit the post-disaster assistance grant application to the Idaho Department of Commerce to assist in funding that bridge replacement, as well as authorization to begin the design process on the project so that we can be in the optimum bid position to bid that project in January of next year. With that, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions the council may have.
Bill, you said that culvert was put in, those 3 culverts back in the day when that was county. That's got to be, what, 60 years ago at least?
At least.
Maybe longer than that. So that we know that that culvert bridge is at least 60 and probably 70 years old. Would that be a good guess, you think?
Yeah, I have not aged it myself, but that would be a good estimation, I would believe.
The questions for Bill before I take public comment.
One question.
Okay, Brandy?
If we are not awarded the A in Baker grant, then that matching funds required for that grant would be available? And could that go towards it?
It would be. That was not programmed for construction until 2024. So we would have those funds at that point in time. I think the local match amount was just about 60,000 on that project. And so those funds would go back into the overall streets capital, or at least we wouldn't have to account for that project match. We wanted to make sure in our long-term planning, the capital improvement plan, every time we make an application, if we don't know of award, we plan for that match obligation. We'll know that within the next 2 months, whether we are awarded that project, and then we can make any adjustments necessary. It wouldn't have a substantial impact in the overall balance, but it does help a little bit.
Any questions for Bill? Thank you for the moment, Bill. Any public out there like to put comments on this action item tonight? Okay, I'll move forward. What would the council like to do?
The bridge needs replacing and fixing. It's not going to get better on its own, and given the events of that flooding, it's going to continue to cause problems, not only at that location, but upstream as well. And so I think we need to take the plunge and do it.
I like that the solution is meeting both needs still, that we can still continue with our road treatment program at, really honestly, a higher than historical rate by a little bit, and then that we can still fix the bridge. It is a public safety issue, and there, in my mind, is no option, so.
I think I've had the pleasure of seeing this. This is the 3rd time, so, which is, but when thinking about proceeding with the design phase, totally understand about the bidding timing being very important. If we were to proceed with that and not get this 150, I would presume at this point, we still have to go ahead and deal with this bridge. We just have to find that 150 from somewhere else.
We do, and we could absorb that in the streets capital fund. So anticipating construction of this bridge, after that year, we still would have roughly $500,000 left in street capital accumulation. It may adjust some later projects that we have to look at, or just potentially tapering that service treatment program for 1 more year to make up for that additional amount. In the current CIP, what we really had programmed in for funding for the CDBG grant was $100,000. That's what we understood to be the maximum award until just about 2 weeks ago, when we heard that they had increased that. So in the CIP, in our financial planning, we were only assuming $100,000 coming in for that CDBG grant. So that's the amount that we'd have to absorb in the CIP, and we do have the flexibility to do that, assuming project costs come within the range of what we have estimated.
Right, so just wanted to make the point that if we start spending money in the design phase and we don't get it, it's not like that was wasted money, because we will have to find some way to.
Have to happen.
From my perspective, but, okay.
I went on there today, anticipation for this, and I thought we do have to replace that soon.
Yeah.
And I think it's inevitable or necessary.
Okay.
I would move to approve submission of the post-disaster relief grant application to the Idaho Department of Commerce for the 6th Street Bridge replacement, and authorize staff to begin project design.
Second. Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion by Brandy and a second by Ann to approve the submission of the post-disaster relief application to the Idaho Department of Commerce for the Sixth Street Bridge replacement and authorize staff to begin the project design. I'll start the roll with Sandra.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Okay, start the design. We'll move on, replace that bridge. Okay, we'll move on to item number 7, ERP contract acceptance. Gary Reeder, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. What you
Sarah
have
Banks is with us as well this evening.
Exactly. This is something the council has seen since roughly last budget meeting that we had in July of 2019. As the council knows, we've had our current ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning Software, fancy name for our bookkeeping software, has been in place since 2002. It's Springbrook Software out of Portland, Oregon. We used that at the time. There were very few applications that could be scaled to a city of our size. So Springbrook was the best solution we had at the time. It was dedicated software. We purchased the suite and actually were pretty satisfied with the way it worked for the first 7 to 10 years. At that time, it became very limited. There are different modules in the software. Not only is it our financial software, but it also provides services, different modules. For instance, our building permit that has a building permit module, community development module, it has a human resources module. These were things that were supposed to make the software integrated so that you wouldn't have different software that didn't talk to the main accounting software, so that you'd have to spend, or you could spend less time re-entering data, thereby providing opportunities for mistakes and that sort of thing. The software basically has not kept up with the needs of the city. This came pretty clear within the last 2 years. We've seen a big uptick in electronic funds transfers, credit card transactions, things like that. Those generate a convenience fee of somewhere between 2.5% to 5% per transaction. A couple of years ago, the state of Idaho allowed cities, counties, governmental entities to be able to recover the cost of that convenience fee. So if you availed yourself of the convenience of using a credit card to pay your bill, then instead of the city taking that 3 or 4% and having to eat that essentially on the backs of the other ratepayers and taxpayers, we could charge that back to the individual who's using the credit card. We approached Springbrook Software, our current software, with the idea that we wanted to impose a convenience fee. We asked the council to include a convenience fee up to 5%, depending on what the actual charge was. In the FY 2020 budget, council did that. We were told just about the time of our council workshop that Springbrook did not have the capability of allowing us to charge that convenience fee. The impact in the FY 2020 budget was about $142,000. So that's $142,000 that the city will end up paying for the privilege, if you will, of taking credit card transactions. That was one of the straw that broke the camel's back, if it will. We also had a situation last year where it's very important that we have controls in our financial transactions and audits of those financial transactions. We had a situation last year where there was a particular transaction that we needed to go back and check the audit trail, is what it's called, from the time the situation occurred till the time that it was resolved. We tried to go into Springbrook and tried to pull an audit trail on that particular transaction, found out that you could not have an audit trail for those transactions. They told us that they quit supporting that in their localized software that we have on premises here. However, if we wanted to have that, we would have to upgrade to their cloud-based software, an additional cost of just shy of $40,000 in addition to what we were already paying. So essentially, we did not want to do that, did not want to lose $140,000. Came to the council during the budget session and talked about what our alternatives were. So we spent the next couple of months looking at those alternatives, mainly other vendors to provide ERP software options. On November 18th, 2019, we came to council with a plan, and the plan was to issue a request for qualifications from providers of ERP software, and that we could fund those with the following funding mechanisms. We would take roughly, at the time, it would have been $80,000 from the three enterprise funds, water, sewer, sanitation, and we had estimated at that time about $140,000 in general funds that were carried over in unanticipated fund balance, funds that were appropriated but not spent in FY 2019. That gave us about $370,000, if my math is correct, that we would have available to get new ERP software. We put out the RFQ, well, council authorized us to do that. How that works is, since it was not budgeted in the FY 2020 budget process, we would then have to come back to council and request that those funds be appropriated in the annual open budget process in August. Council gave us authority to move ahead. We issued that RFP, or request for qualifications, on November 28th. It was due on January 6th. We received 3 proposals or statements of qualifications back. I guess they were proposals, excuse me. Those proposals came from 3 different vendors, Springbrook, Tyler Technologies, and a firm named BS&A. Those were reviewed by city staff, and there were representatives of finance, community development, information systems, the city clerk, administration. I must be missing somebody. Oh, and human resources. Evaluated those, determined that for various reasons, the only firm that was invited for an interview was BS&A. Those interviews took place January 27th and 28th of 2020. That same group of folks, including the assistant finance director and representatives of other various departments, were given a presentation by BS&A Software for 2 days. We talked about the different modules that they had, including, and you have a memo in your packets explaining this in more detail, including financial management. That would include general ledger, accounts payable, cash receipting, miscellaneous receivables, fixed assets, purchase orders, and utility billing, essentially the full suite of financial software. In addition, it had an integrated module for personnel management, allowing us to manage payroll through the software as well, integrate that into the financial software, human resources management, and timesheets. One of the things that we don't have is an enterprise-wide electronic timesheet program. Most of the city staff does it by hand. The police have a modified program that allows them to have some timesheet capabilities, but the rest of the city does not. In addition, business licensing, those would be our alcohol licenses, taxi licenses, so on and so forth, daycare, some others could be utilized with the business module, and then local improvement districts, which is something we do by statute as well. There was also a community development module that seemed to be a little bit expensive. It was fully integrated, but we have a solution at this point that meets our needs. There is an opportunity to get that program to talk to the BS&A software, so we may not be out of the woods there yet. However, in discussing with BS&A, we talked about the option of being able to do additional evaluation of the community development module and then make a decision later on in the year whether we wish to execute that module. In the meantime, should the council approve this, and I'm getting the cart ahead of the horse a little bit, we would have a year, 9 months to a year, to integrate this software. After the interviews, we rated, sat down and as a group and determined that BS&A had a good software product. They are out of Bath, Michigan. We would be the third of 3 installations they have in Idaho. City of Sandpoint and City of Hayden also retained them last year, and they're very satisfied with the work that they do. So we come to you tonight with the proposal, as we stated on November 18th. We would like to have the council approve the selection of BS&A software. You have at the dais tonight, I've given you a copy of the software contract. We were still negotiating that as of last Friday. We just got the revised copy in today. It was being negotiated for a couple of reasons. Certainly we haven't, it has to be approved by council, so this is a prospective draft contract. There were some issues of where, if there was issues, would they be litigated in Michigan or would they be in Idaho? Got that resolved. Mostly it had to do with some of the licensing issues, some of the representative warranties, and then because we were holding off on the community development software, they had to pull that out of their pricing scheme. The original pricing was around $540,000 if memory serves. After the community development module is removed, it comes out to $393,075. So if the council approves it, we would need to identify funding, which we have. As I mentioned, we had identified funding in the 3 enterprise funds. We will be utilizing funding out of the Water and Sewer Fund that had been budgeted or appropriated for some updated comprehensive plans. Those comprehensive plans are, I believe, 8 years old, something like that. They need to be updated. They do not need to be totally redone. So that estimate was high. We believe that there is the ability to utilize some of those funds that were funded at $200,000 per enterprise fund. We could utilize $100,000 in each of those funds to help support this ERP software. The ERP software also, utility billing is a huge piece of this. And a lot of the finances of the city, besides our general ledger and general finances, are specifically geared for the enterprise funds. So that's the reasoning for having the enterprise funds help support the software. We'd also identify $100,000 out of the sanitation fund. Sanitation has a development fund that has the capacity to fund $100,000 as well. In addition, we have $160,000. I'd mentioned that we had earmarked $140. It was actually $160 in unanticipated fund balance carryover. So those, again, were funds that were appropriated in FY 2019, but were not expended because of programs that did not proceed, costs that came in under budget, so on and so forth, giving us a total of $460,000 available to implement the software. There are some customizations that may need to occur. We have permit track software from community development. That's that software that would take the place of BS&A's community development software. We have software at Parks and Recreation for timekeeping. We have some software, AIMS, which is our parking enforcement software, all that will have to be customized so it can speak to the BS&A software as well. Those customizations were not included in the original, so we wanted to build a contingency in there if council gives us the authority to proceed. In addition, if council allows us to select BS&A, allows us to enter into the contract, we would also like the council's authority to move ahead with our funding proposal. If so, we will bring that forward, enter into the contract, and bring those amounts forward. It may be less than the full $460,000. We won't know that until we actually get the implementation done. And we will bring those forward in the open budget process in August. One of the big things in this software is not just that you're switching over. Anybody who sat through a software conversion knows that it is a bloodletting. Nobody likes it. Staff was not excited about it, but it's one of those things that we're losing money with our current software. It doesn't meet our needs. We need to look forward, so that's why we're coming forward with this now. In talking to Hayden and standpoint, one of the things that BSNA does very well is convert your data. So they would handle the data conversion and migration. It's not a cheap proposal. About $100,000 of the overall proposal is conversion and migration of data. There will be some slight customization in there, but mostly it's conversion and migration. They will come on site for up to, I believe it's 34 days to sit with our people and get this implemented. We will begin, once the contract is signed, we will begin to send data sets back to BSNA for them to start their process from their home offices in Michigan. The conversion process is estimated to take between 9 months and 12 months. During that time, it takes a long time. We will run a parallel systems. We will have the system, Springbrook system that we have now, so there should be no hiccup in services to the public or for our bookkeeping services, finance services. And during that time, we will be also running the parallel BSNA software. So when the cutover is done, it'll change, but it should be fairly transparent, certainly transparent to the public. It's a big project. We understand that, and I think I've explained the circumstances why it wasn't done in the FY 2020 budget proposal. We could have waited, proposed it in the FY 2021 budget proposal, but it's also a timing issue. And the timing issue is you either cross a budget year, which we will end up doing, we'll end up being part in FY 20 and FY 21 if we go the full 9 months to a year. But there are times when the finance department and other departments are especially busy. Right now, the audit is just about closed. We are about to embark on the budget, so there is some time for finance to pick up and begin the process. Jesse Flowers, our information services director, has been designated the project manager of this project, so he will be working with BSNA, coordinating with all the staff, the different departments to implement the program. So with that, Sarah and I will stand for any questions you have.
Gary, the current software that we've had, I know has been an issue for 6 years. There's always been some kind of problem with it, and it's been difficult. It's been going on for longer than that. So, questions for Gary before I open up for public comment?
I just have one.
Randy.
Can you repeat again about the community development software piece of that? I'm sorry.
Community development, it seemed expensive. It was about $140,000 in addition. So that's what put it up to that $540,000 number. In looking at it, we have a small firm out of Seattle or the west side of Washington that works with community development. It meets our needs at this point. The firm has been very good about providing alterations to their software to meet our needs. The question is whether it can fully integrate with BSNA or talk to each other. Even if it can't, it may not be worth that additional funding. That's a lot of money. And if what we're looking at is trying to reduce as much hands-on time from staff as we can. If you can enter the data once and it feeds through the system, then you don't have opportunities for miskeying information, making mistakes, that sort of thing. Reporting is so much easier if you can have an integrated system. But again, and Bill's office is going to take a look at it over the next year. They've guaranteed their price. We can exercise the option over that year period. But if the cost benefit isn't there, then we may stay with the software that we have.
Okay, I'm interested in public comment. If we got anybody out there that'd like to speak about this or know anything about this, they're welcome to come forward at this time. Okay, with that, well, this was on Public Works and Finance on February the 10th.
Indeed.
Gina, so.
I think that we all felt that it was a necessary evil, and that we needed to get it started and make lives easier, and, well, at least in the next years. This year, maybe not so much, but we all kind of, as a consensus, believed that it was important to do.
And ultimately, in the long term, it will save money. And that's some investment up front.
Right.
Well, I also failed to mention, if I may, that the annual maintenance fees on this software actually are cheaper than the ones we're currently paying now.
Did you have something to say?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I agree with the comments so far, but also it's a big point with me is that we're able to collect the credit card charges that we're foregoing at the moment. That's $140,000 a year. It doesn't take 5 years to pay back what the initial investment is, not to mention the staff time that's currently devoted to multiple re-entries of data with all of the errors that are prone with a process like that. And I would like to get in software that is fully integrated and eliminates those potential problems. Painful though it may be for staff, the learning curve.
Sandra?
So, when this was presented earlier, one of my main questions was, how does the staff think of this? Because I've had to go through those things, and it's gut-wrenching and awful, and you just kind of want to die. And sure enough, that was sort of the overall view of it, with the exception that I was told by several people that even though it's hard to go through this process, and even though it's not a process you look forward to, the end result will be nice, because all of our departments can talk to one another, and there's not a lot of confusion, and you can follow that audit trail, because when that gets broken up, that is awful also. And so I do not envy those that have to go through this year, because it's always bad. It's always hard, but I'm excited about the end result, and that's why I'm very much in favor of this.
Jeannie, you answer?
I'm going to make a motion.
Oh,
I move that we approve the selection of BSNA, yes, Enterprise Resource Planning Software, the software license and services agreement when negotiations are complete, the funding program as outlined in the attached memo from the city supervisor and the discussion this evening. And I will direct the staff to bring the necessary appropriation forward in the city's FY 2020 open budget process.
Second.
okay. We have a motion by Gina and a second by Sandra to approve the selection of BSA Enterprise Resources Planning Software, the software license, and services agreement when negotiations are complete. The funding program is outlined in the attached memo from City Supervisor, and direct staff to bring the necessary appropriation forward in city's 2020 open budget process. I will start to roll with Maureen.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we will start the process.
Thank you.
Gary. Okay, let's see, with that, that is the end of our regular agenda, so we will go into reports. I'll start with you, Art.
Me? Well, hot off the presses, the Smart Transit met today, and there's a lot percolating with that group. Dan Gray, the current director, is out as of the 1st of March, but will stick around until the 17th on an as-needed basis to facilitate the transition to Ben Emmett, who's hired from the University of Idaho to be the new director. Additionally, there's a possible third route being considered for Smart Transit that runs out out to the east and back, so it picks up the big apartment complexes on White Avenue and the Grove, and would really facilitate moving more people back and forth from the university and around town. Go online on Facebook. U of I has notes up. The city has notes up. Write a letter of support to the Idaho Department of Transportation on this one so we can get that funded and in business. Additionally, the parking services at U of I are producing videos on how to ride a bus, which sounds ridiculous, but when it comes to public transit, a lot of the students come from places where public transit does not exist, and they need a little kickstart on this is how you utilize public transportation. Further, Dial-A-Ride has instituted a third bus for the midday hours because of the popularity of that system, which has really become popular for people to use, scheduling the Dial-A-Ride ahead of time and getting to where they need to be. And altogether in 2019, they counted 194,112 riders, of which 12,000 were on Dial-A-Ride, but the rest were on the usual fixed routes. So the system is quite popular and gets a lot of ridership. So Smart Transit is moving on with some good stuff. It was a busy day today, and that's all I have.
Okay, Gina.
My one and only commission, the Fair and Affordable Housing Commission meeting was canceled last week. And it turns out that it was because most of us were not available, but mostly me. I'm supposed to give an update on the Palouse Regional Housing Assessment Leadership Team. Big title. And I can tell you that the kind of the core for people that are members of the steering committee are going to meet on Friday. There were 12 applicants for the leadership team. And we will decide what we're going to move or what we're going to do from there. I don't anticipate turning anybody away at this point. But that's the update that I know of right now.
Okay, Sandra.
So I'll start with planning and zoning. We met last week, and the majority of the topic had to do with the 5G installment that's in the works. Two big things that I was very much interested in, thought that the city would also be interested in, would be the commission decided that, you know, they really want to go the slow route on this. They don't want to jump the gun on anything. They're working really hard on looking at what's happened in Pullman, what's happened in Lewiston, also in Denver. This has been implemented. They're coming up with some good drafts and ideas, but they are wanting to take this slow, and in terms of, up to a year on making sure they do it the right way. The other thing they also decided to do, because you have zoning issues and you have aesthetic issues, and then there's also been some health concerns, they decided to share that with the Sustainability Commission and have that group look at the Sustainable Environment Commission, I think is the title. And they will be taking on the health concerns issues on that. So the two commissions are going to work together right now, each taking their own spot, and then we'll come together and visit about it. So that was good. Let's see, the Pathways Commission met. I did not meet because I had that nasty bug that I think most of you probably enjoyed, and I didn't want to share that with my newfound friends. But they were nice enough to share with me the map that they've been working on. They're making beautiful banners for the farmers market and for other events that they go to, and they've worked really hard on this. And my favorite part of the whole thing, I hope you get a chance to look at it, is this great map that they put together on the banner that shows not just the pathways, but how to get safely to the pathways to enjoy them, which can be tricky because they're showing where the right stop signs are and where the streets are wider and where they're narrower. So those that maybe aren't as secure on a bicycle or walking, they now have a good way to get where they want to go when they want to take advantage of the pathways. The 1912 Center, we will meet tomorrow, but I just want to share I'm pretty excited about the things that are going on there. The second floor renovation is underway. They have the pocket doors in. They have been doing some other work, so I'm very excited to meet with them tomorrow and see what the next steps are.
Thank you, Sandra. Brandy?
Okay, the tree commission met, and there was a presentation from Abby, who's an AmeriCorps volunteer, working on the Little Free Gardens project, and she did a presentation on that, which I've seen there's been a press release. It's been in the paper, so that's going to be very cool. And then they also talked about their planning for the Arbor Day event, tree planting on April 24th, and I know the
Great.
mayor is always there to assist with that. So they're working on the location and also plan their day that they all get together and volunteer to bag all these tree seedlings.
fun
That's a
day.
part of that
It's
day
fun.
too. So they're also working on text that they intend to go out on one of the utility bills about pruning practices, kind of good versus poor practices, to just help educate all of us and help us if we have hired someone and we can say, wait, don't do it that way. That's not good for the tree. So getting that information out. Then the Transportation Commission also met. Let's see. Bill Belknap, who is the city liaison for there, had some great presentations. He presented on the stop sign warrant analysis that Transportation Commission had been interested in on 3rd and Hayes and 3rd and Blaine, and the whole warrant process. And the conclusion of all of that is that the warrants some were partially met, some were not met at all, but ultimately, based on that analysis, the Public Works does not recommend installation of stop signs at either of those locations, so the Transportation Commission is going to think on that for a while. And let's see. Bill also provided the Transportation Commission with a parking study update. He's preparing the requests for qualifications. The Committee will be seeing that, I believe, next week, and then on to council after that.
Man.
The Moscow Arts Commission did a wonderful job about talking about what they have been and are doing. The Farmers Market Commission is doing a lot of, I would say, just sort of reviewing their bylaws and just operations before the season starts. And then PBAC, the Palouse Space and Aquifer Committee, we have a communications subcommittee. So that's made up of the cities, counties, and universities, the more public-facing folks, because there are typically there's someone who's an elected official, or again in that more public-facing capacity, and then someone who is in the technical capacity. So for us, it's myself and Tyler Palmer, as well as Mike in the water department. And so we've gotten together. We're forming it's an engagement group, essentially, stakeholder engagement group that will be. Whoever's a part of that will be connecting to their constituency, essentially, or working with the public at large, help get the word out about a water alternative. And so if you know anybody who you think might be interested in that and is willing to kind of participate and then share information with the folks that they know, we're looking to get that together in the next, I think we're looking at 6 weeks. And we're trying to find that sweet spot between providing direction for those folks while still giving them the ability to kind of decide exactly how that looks. And so if you know anybody, we're definitely looking for names. And that's it.
Very good. Maureen?
The volunteer fire department met last week, and basically they're working on they got a new program that is a program that they're using to keep track of who's available when and such. And so they're talking about the implementation of that. The other two commissions, the Human Rights Commission met in the middle of the stormwater meeting, and then the sustainability meeting met during the city council meeting. So I can't give you updates on those. I can tell you, though, everybody is talking about both human rights as well as sustainability, the 5G stuff. And I wanted to point out one of the additional aspects that's going on 5G is that on February 26th, the legal aspect of 5G is being presented by Rich Seaman at the 1912 as part of the League of Women Voters thing. And so I think that there's a huge aspect here with respect to what cities can and can't do vis-a-vis 1912. And so I think that one aspect is all the health issues, and the other aspect of what does the legislation really allow cities and counties and states to do about those concerns.
Okay. Well, I got several things. On the 5th, we had the monthly city-county Moscow School District UNI meeting. It was a small group of us, but we talked about a lot of stuff, and we took up the whole time to share a bunch of good information. On 2/7 and 2/14, I had an AIC legislative call on legislative matters. I'm going to get into that here in just a minute. On 2/10, we had a Mayor's Youth Advisory Council meeting. I went over a bunch of different things, and one of the things was for me to get a chance to present at our local high school to Access Club, which I did on 2/13. And then the whole idea was to try to recruit more kids from the high school to be interested in being on the Mayor's Youth Council. I also got a chance that evening to go to Logos School, where we handed out popcorn to some of the kids and talked to them. I had 3 other Mayor's Youth Advisory kids there. They had a basketball game, so I got a chance to mix with them and talk to a bunch of parents, and so that was a fun evening. And on the 2/14 legislative session, a lot of things are going on, folks, and one thing that we know about is there's been this movement and talk a lot about property tax freeze, 409, and there's a whole bunch of things. There will be something coming up, but it is a kind of a hodgepodge. We know that the House as well as the Senate are meeting together in the governor's office with Association of Idaho Cities and a representative from counties, my understanding, and they're going to come up with some kind of a solution. Is more of there's something going to be happening, but I really don't know what that information is. Hopefully I'll find out more this Friday to follow to find out what that means for us. And so I don't want to comment any more about that because I'd just be talking about something I simply didn't have any idea what I'm talking about, so I'm not going to do that. And earlier today, we had a storm water workshop here in this very room for a couple of hours with this council, and we talked about stormwater issues, and more of that to come for all of us in our community, so we're gonna be talking a lot about that. And tomorrow, I give the State of the Union for the city address, which will be fun. I always look forward to that, and we're gonna talk about a number of different things in that stormwater workshop assessment. We're gonna talk a little bit about that during that, so we're looking at having an active day tomorrow. Gary, do you have any reports?
The only report I have is the mayor and I will be going to Washington DC on March 5th for the National League of Cities, along with Arts accompanying us as well. We also have our annual strategic planning workshop and our first capital improvement planning workshop going on Friday, February 28th, starting at 9 o'clock in these chambers and ending no later than 4 o'clock.
With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Let's go.
Everybody in favor of that? Anybody opposed? Okay, we're adjourned at 8:11, folks.